So there's been a lot of talk in recent weeks and recent months regarding John Salza and his change of position regarding the SSPX, and Archbishop Lefebvre. Because of that, there's not a week that goes by where I don't get numerous messages from Catholics sending me, video links and articles to guys like Michael Lofton and others, who are against the position of Archbishop Lefebvre and what he did in consecrating the bishops without the papal mandate to do so back in 1988. And, I posted a couple of posts just in the past week about Archbishop Lefebvre, and that started, the floodgates opened, and I was just inundated with messages from people going back and forth. People have been asking me, Salza just recently did a video, okay? Just recently went on an interview where he talked all about his views and thoughts, and I've had several people asking me, what my thoughts are on it, if I've watched it, am I going to write a rebuttal to it? The reality is I haven't watched it yet. I really don't have a desire to be honest with you. And I may eventually watch it. I may eventually get around to it. But see, for me, it's here's the difficulty. It's not much different, and I try to say this in every way with charity and with humility, with honesty. It's very similar to me that frequently I get links to YouTube videos, hour-long videos, or long articles people will send me that are anti-Catholic, Protestant, apologetic stuff. And they want me to go through it and answer every single thing line by line. And I skim these videos, and it's the same thing, that you always hear from Protestants against Catholicism. Show me this from the Bible, show me that from the Bible. The church invented this, the church invented that. This is not biblical, all that kind of stuff. And it's like, I've been dealing with this stuff for literally over 2 decades now. Almost going on a quarter century at this point. I don't spend my time doing much of that anymore, watching some hour-long video of what a Protestant thinks about Catholicism and then having to answer line by line. I just don't, because to me, a bulk of it is just very irrelevant. The doctrines of, for example, the Catholic Church, okay, let's say about Mary, her Immaculate Conception, her perpetual virginity, her bodily assumption, the doctrines of indulgences, the doctrine of faith and works as it pertains to salvation, the theology of the sacraments, okay, the dogma of purgatory, okay. These types of doctrines, properly speaking, are not up for debate. Not from a Catholic, they're not up for debate. As if we can go back and forth on the pros and cons and see who has more points. Okay, they're not up for debate because these are dogmas, these are doctrines. From our perspective, from the Catholic perspective, these belong to the deposit of faith revealed by our Lord and the apostles. They're not up for debate, okay, in that context. So, what you can do, though, is, and what ought to be done, is you go right back to the foundation. You tell the Protestant, I'm not going to sit here and go back and forth with you on purgatory or on the Immaculate Conception, because at the end of the day, it's not going to do anything. You'll find something new to drag up against the Catholic Church. Okay? Instead, we have to debate the foundational issue. And in that context, it's authority. That's the foundational issue. Okay? Why do you believe sola scriptura? Why don't you believe sacred tradition? Why don't you believe the magisterium? That has to be analyzed first and foremost. Okay? Once you concede on that point, then we can teach you why we believe all these dogmas and doctrines and where their roots are in scripture and tradition and magisterial teaching. We can teach you where they come from. We're not going to debate you on them. Okay? We will challenge you and take you to task on the issue of authority, because that's the foundational issue. Once you can show a Protestant the foundational issue, okay, for example, the church has the authority to bind and loose. If a Protestant can come to see that, the rest falls like dominoes, one by one, off the bat, because the church bound it, thus it's bound in heaven, thus it's true. Now that we know it's true, we can teach you why we believe it, Okay, how we understand it. We can teach you all the theology and the doctrine behind it. Okay, but we're not going to debate you on those things. We're going to challenge you on the issue of authority. I say all that because this is very similar to me, what I've noticed, and I'm not sure if others have caught this or not, but this is just my observation. When it comes to things like trying to debate the actions and decisions of Archbishop Lefebvre in 1988, okay, he went to consecrate 4 bishops, and he did not have the specific papal mandate to do so, but he did it, okay, and he claimed it was due to a necessity. It was necessary that he do this because of the growing crisis facing the church. Okay, now what happens today, all these years later, these decades later, is everyone wants to pick apart and debate, well, John Paul II said this, and John Paul II said that, and Ratzinger came in and said this, but then Benedict, when he became Pope, Benedict said that, but Archbishop Lefebvre said this, but he did that, well, his bishops thought this, and canon law this, and they want to go all these different points. All those points are after the fact. You have to get first and foremost to the foundational issue on that topic. That's the only thing worth discussing. It's the only thing worth debating, okay, is the foundational issue. You get that and the rest falls like dominoes. And I'm going to tell you what that foundational issue is right in a second, but I'm saying that because nobody can dispute at all that topics like supply jurisdiction belong to the history of the church. No one can dispute that ideas like supply jurisdiction because of persecution, because of crisis, acts done out of necessity, have their place in canon law and have their place in history. Okay? The question will always come down to at what times in history do these things apply? Okay? And what do you do if the very thing that is causing the urgency and the necessity is emanating from the hierarchy itself? Okay? The foundational issue is the issue of the crisis. The crisis facing the church, the crisis that has been facing the church now for some time. Okay? It blew up wide and clear after the Second Vatican Council. Its fruits were all the more evident after the Novus Ordo liturgy of Paul VI. Okay, and then as we saw the vision, the directive of Vatican II start to unfold as the decades went on, all the more so this became clear. But it is important to say, of course, that the crisis itself didn't begin at Vatican II. Okay, Vatican II is just where it became very evident, okay, to Catholics of goodwill. All right, but it was brewing long before then, and we know this. The popes were writing encyclicals about it. Okay. So, this, in a sense, this has been going on for some time. All right, the incoming onslaught of modernism within the church. Okay, progressive theology infecting our catechesis. All right, the liturgical revolution seeking to imitate Protestant services, the subversion of Freemasons, the infiltration of communists into seminaries. These are all things that were happening in the decades prior to Vatican II, that the popes were warning us about, that the popes were hearing about, the popes were seeing this happen. Okay, and they were all talking about it. They were writing encyclicals on it. All right, right up until Pius XII even. I mean, right prior to John the 23rd and Vatican II, the Pope right before him was talking about these things. Our Lady was warning us about these things as early as Quito, Ecuador in the 16th century, naming the middle of the 20th century as the pivotal time when we'd start to see the shift. We'd start to see these things happening through what she said, the Masonic sects. Okay? Leo XIII, who had a vision of the devil wanting 100 years to attack the church, right at the dawn of the 20th century. Right? Our Lady of Fatima, revealing to Sister Lucia a third part to a secret that dealt with apostasy. Okay? The crisis is the issue we have to begin with. We don't begin by analyzing and debating canon law. You know how many people have told me just in the past week, the DMs I've gotten from people that are accusing me of privately interpreting canon law. Okay? We're not debating how someone interprets canon law. And we're not going to start pointing to books about, well, this canon has said this, well, this canon lawyer said that. That's not what we're doing here. Okay? We're not even debating what John Paul II thought or believed, and what he wrote in a letter, what he said in a speech. And to be very honest with you, we're not even looking at what Benedict had to say in vindicating Lefebvre. Okay? These are all, in a sense, moot points. They're irrelevant in the sense that those can all be discussed after the fact. You have to go first to the core issue, which is the issue of, is there a crisis facing the church? Did Archbishop Lefebvre personally believe and see a crisis facing the church that warranted urgency and necessity to preserve the pure, unadulterated, true doctrine, the traditional doctrine and liturgy of the church? That's what has to be analyzed first. And wherever you fall on that issue, whatever side you fall on, that's going to determine how you choose to interpret and filter everything that comes after it. Okay, from law to events that took place, that's what's going to interpret it. Okay, I just want to quickly give you a brief overview, okay, of the third secret of Fatima, because people like to dispute this all of a sudden. Okay, I mean, and I've had people debating me on it again in my DMs. But we don't really know what the third secret has to say. Okay, I've written an article on this. You can all find it at returnoftheking.live, the real third secret of Fatima. But when Our Lady gave Sister Lucia the third secret, okay, Father Jongen asked Sister Lucia about the third secret of Fatima, and she said, he told her, you've already made known the two parts of the secret. When will the time arrive for the third part? Okay, and she says, I communicated the third part in a letter to the Bishop of Lieria, but it cannot be made known before 1960. In 1955, Cardinal Ottaviani asked Sister Lucia point blank, why wait until 1960? And she said, according to what Our Lady told her, Sister Lucia said, because then it will seem clearer. It will seem more clear. In 1960 is when John the 23rd began implementing changes into the liturgy, and when he began preparations for the Second Vatican Council. He read the third part of the secret, wept, and put it back, locked it up, and said, this does not belong to my papacy. Even though Our Lady wanted him to reveal it in 1960, he chose not to. Okay, Paul VI read it, and he ordered Cardinal Ottaviani to tell the world that the secret would never be revealed. That's what he said. Sister Lucia was asked, okay, she was asked directly what the contents of the third secret pertain to. And here's what she said. Sister Lucia said, and this is in 1957, she says, it's in the Gospel and the Apocalypse. Read them. And she referred specifically to the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 24, which pertains to end-time events. And she referred to the Apocalypse, chapters 8 and chapters 13. She said that formed the content of the third secret. Okay. Sister Lucia was asked, okay, she was asked directly what the contents of the third secret pertain to. And here's what she said. Sister Lucia said, and this is in 1957, she says, it's in the Gospel and the Apocalypse. Read them. And she referred specifically to the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 24, which pertains to end-time events. And she referred to the Apocalypse, chapters 8 and chapters 13. She said that formed the content of the third secret. Okay? I want to read to you really quick. I'm going to go through this quickly, but I want you to get the effect of this. I'm going to read to you Apocalypse chapter 13. Okay, you can take the time to read Matthew 24 and Apocalypse 8, but this is Apocalypse 13 that Sister Lucia said connected to the third part of the Secret of Fatima. And I saw a beast coming up out of the sea, having 7 heads, 10 horns, and upon its horns 10 diadems, and upon his heads names of blasphemy. The beast which I saw was likened to a leopard. His feet were as the feet of a bear, his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his own strength and great power. And I saw one of his heads as it were slain to death, and his death's wound was healed. And all the earth was in admiration after the beast. And they adored the dragon. They adored the dragon, which gave power to the beast. And they adored the beast, saying, who is like to the beast? And who shall be able to fight with him? And there was given to him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies. and power was given to him to do 42 months. And he opened his mouth unto blasphemies against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle, and them that dwell in heaven. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints, to overcome them. Power was given him over every tribe, people, tongue, and nation. All that dwell upon the earth adored him. They adored him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb, which was slain from the beginning of the world. If any man have an ear, let him hear. He that shall be led into captivity shall go into captivity. He that shall kill by the sword must be killed by the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. And I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns, like a lamb, and he spoke as a dragon. He executed all the power of the former beast in his sight, and he caused the earth, and them that dwell therein, to adore the first beast, whose wound to death was healed. And he did great signs, so that he made also fire to come down from heaven unto the earth in the sight of men. He seduced them that dwell on the earth for the signs which were given him to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth, that they should make the image of the beast which had the wound by the sword and lived. And it was given him to give life to the image of the beast, and that the image of the beast should speak, and should cause that whosoever will not adore the image of the beast should be slain. And he shall make all, both little and great, rich and poor, freemen and bondmen, to have a character in their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, but he that hath the character or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. He that hath understanding, let him count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and the number of him is 666. That's Apocalypse 13. That's what Sister Lucia said applied to the third secret of Fatima. Okay, that was supposed to be revealed in 1960. Sister Lucia said, she said in 1957, believe me, Father, God will chastise the world, and this will be in a terrible manner. The punishment from heaven is imminent. My mission is to indicate to everyone the imminent danger we are in of losing our souls for all eternity if we remain obstinate in sin. The devil knows what it is that most offends God, and which in a short space of time will gain for him the greatest number of souls. Listen to this part. The most holy Virgin made me to understand that we are living in the last times of the world. In 1976, Father Alonso, who compiled volumes of work studying Fatima, said that the text makes concrete references to the crisis of faith within the church and the negligence of the pastors themselves. Now, I'm going to do one thing here, and this is going to be the conclusion of this video, but this is what I want to do. People want to debate whether or not Archbishop Lefebvre had grounds to do what he did. Okay, they will, again, they'll argue back and forth. Oh, he should have been patient. He should have waited. Okay, and then on the other side, we're going to say, well, Rome wasn't, being patient with him, and they were basically waiting for him to pass away, and, and all. We're going to go back and forth on this whole debate. Okay, whether or not Archbishop Lefebvre reacted rash or what, The most important point on all this is whether or not, again, Archbishop Lefebvre recognized and believed that the church was facing a crisis. Some people have told me, and I've gotten this from a handful of people, that whether or not we're in a crisis, it's all subjective. Okay, one's definition of a crisis. All right, well, we're connecting, right? I just read to you what Sister Lucia had to say about the third part of the secret pertaining to apostasy. All right. But we also have to connect those dots to what it was that Lefebvre was seeing in the decade leading up to his act of consecrating the 4 bishops. And we have to honestly ask ourselves, if this, what I'm about to read to you, what I'm about to show you, if this shows us, okay, a genuine crisis within the church. All right. This is what Lefebvre was seeing beginning in 1980. In 1980, a group of Buddhists and Shintoists visit John Paul II in Rome, and John Paul II said to them, quote, of the esteem of the church we have for your religion and of your high spiritual values. In 1980, John Paul II addresses Muslims in Paris as brothers. It is with great joy that I address my greeting to you, Muslims, our brothers in the faith in the one God. Our brothers in the faith in the one God. In 1980, John Paul II visits Turkey as a head of state, not as a religious leader, and while there he quotes from the Muslim Bible, the Quran. In 1980, John Paul II addresses Lutherans, saying, encourage your fellow Lutheran brothers in a friendly manner to bear witness to their faith, to strengthen, to deepen their form of the religious life in Christ. In 1980, John Paul II visits a Lutheran church in Germany on the anniversary of Martin Luther's birth and praises the, quote, profound religiosity and spiritual heritage of Martin Luther. 1981, John Paul II addresses the Buddhist Federation in Japan by saying it would take a long time to make a list of the spiritual values of which you are the guardians and teachers. 1982, John Paul II joins an Anglican service with the Archbishop of Canterbury. 1982, he promulgates a new code of canon law and removes any mention of excommunication regarding Freemasonry. 1983, John Paul II and several cardinals take place in a ceremony held in a Lutheran church in Rome, and a prayer composed by Martin Luther is recited during the service, while John Paul II preaches to the crowd. In 1984, a topless native woman publicly reads the epistle at John Paul II's Mass in New Guinea. Also in 1984, John Paul II visits a Buddhist monastery in Thailand and praises the, quote, ancient and venerable wisdom of Buddhism. 1984, John Paul II visits Canada and celebrates the liturgy there. The chief of the Red Indian tribes burns herbs in honor of their pagan god and presents John Paul II with an eagle feather covered with blood. 1985, John Paul II assists in pagan rites at the sacred forest of animists in Toga, Africa. He participates in satanic rites in which a sorcerer invoked the spirits. He later is quoted in the press as specifically saying, and you can look this up as well, he said, there in Africa for the first time I prayed with animists. In 1985, John Paul II speaks to Muslims in a stadium in Casablanca and says that we worship the same God, even though the Muslims deny the Trinity, and their Quran says that those who believe in the Trinity are impure, just like excrement and urine. 1986, John Paul II receives a blessing, a mark on the forehead, and cow dung ashes in India from a Hindu priestess. 1986, various pagan ceremonies proceed and are included in John Paul II's Mass. And then the big one, the Assisi Interfaith Meetings, 1986. Okay, and I'm reading this report from, this was how the USA Today presented the Assisi Interfaith Meeting. John Paul II has called for a day of world prayer for peace. 160 representatives from 12 different religions came to Assisi, where each faith had separate prayer meetings. Among the participants invited by John Paul II, the Dalai Lama, John Pretty on Top, who is the Crow medicine man from Montana, Buddhist monks who have incense, African snake worshippers parading through cobblestone streets, Jews, Muslims, Hindus, Zoroastrians, Sikhs, Jains, Baha'is, Protestants, and also other Christians took part. Even Libya also sent a Muslim representative. A Buddhist statue was placed in the tabernacle of the Church of St. Francis of Assisi by Dalai Lama, and members of various religions were permitted to hold services in the Catholic churches throughout Assisi. It is also noted that same year, a study is done that in the past 20 years, 17,000 priests and 53,000 nuns have left the church. Enrollment in U.S. seminaries has declined by half. 20% of French Catholics attend Mass, in West Germany, 30%. 80% of American Catholics differ with the Church's teaching now on birth control, support optional celibacy for priests, and believe that divorced Catholics should be allowed to remarry in the Church. A report that was delivered to the Pope, 150 pages, shows that U.S. seminaries and women's religious orders are, quote, in a state of crisis. In 1987, John Paul II meets with the Orthodox Patriarch Demetrios I and says, "We are sister churches, and we walk together towards full communion." When Patriarch Demetrios dies, John Paul II calls him, quote, a great servant of the church. And I didn't even touch on the visits to synagogues where John Paul II prays and concelebrates with rabbis. This is what Lefebvre was seeing in 1988. Now, you ask yourself if this is a crisis facing the church, coming from the very top, or it's not. You ask yourself that honest question. Because I'll tell you this, if it is a crisis facing the church, and it connects to what the Pope's warned us about, and what Our Lady was warning us about, what Sister Lucia was telling us, if this is a crisis in the church, everything else falls like dominoes. Okay, you can't, once you can see that there's the crisis, you can't then go on and say, well, but I don't know, John Paul II was saying this, and canon law, you can't do that anymore. Okay, the moment you recognize there's a crisis, automatically we are in a state of urgency and necessity, and supply jurisdiction kicks in. And that urgency and necessity coming because of the very hierarchy itself. Okay? Start praying and fasting for the hierarchy now, today. Stop making debates and waves with Lefebvre and holy bishops and clergy like him. The task we have is to pray and fast and sacrifice for the hierarchy that's compromised with error. That's what we have to do. Because we are in the greatest crisis facing the church in her entire history. Believe me on that. God bless you.